It took 3 years to organize. It required absolute secrecy. It changed the course of history. On a single day, June the 6th, 1944, 200,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches at Normandy. The greatest invasion in history was orchestrated by the very finest military minds. But there were others who toiled away behind the scenes. The inventors, the mavericks, the forgotten heroes drafted in with a specific command. To create a top-secret armory. Machines that could breathe fire, tanks that could swim, gadgets and mechanical contraptions that could smash through Hitler's defenses. This was Operation Overlord. This was D-Day. "60 years on, the grand plan behind Operation Overlord still seems hugely ambitious. Back in June 1944, even its chief architect wasn't sure it would work. On the night before the invasion, General Dwight D. Eisenhower scribbled a statement that should D-Day fail, he was ready to take the blame. Eisenhower hoped he would outwit the enemy. His invasion force would not attack France at the point closest to England. Instead, over 5,000 vessels would journey an extra 10 hours to hit a stretch of open beach further down the French coast and take the Germans by surprise. If they could shatter the German defenses in just 24 hours, the Allied forces led by America and Britain could then sweep up towards Berlin from the west, and with the Soviet Union driving in from the east, topple Hitler from his throne. The liberation of Europe hinged on establishing that toehold in France on day one. Get it wrong, and the whole invasion force would limp home. 3 years of planning wasted. Getting it right meant gathering the latest intelligence about what the Germans had in store for them. And that had to be done in complete secrecy. Off the coast of France, an X-craft lurks just below the surface. Inside this state-of-the-art mini-submarine are 5 underwater spies.
We beached the craft and put the periscope up, which is really no thicker than a walking stick, and brilliant vision from it too. We were able to see the German soldiers very well. But what they didn't know was that within about 8 feet was a commander Royal Navy, a major Royal Engineers, and 2 other naval officers.
What they were spying on could cost them their lives. The German soldiers were hard at work building an elaborate system of beach defenses under the direct supervision of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel.
Rommel had just taken over command and been round, and we knew this from intelligence, and really stirred them up. And so it was an amazing amount of activity going on to develop the defenses there. They really were working incredibly hard. We were most surprised.
The German command had anticipated a seaborne invasion and had plans to stop it before it even hit dry land. A series of death traps hidden beneath the water at high tide were primed to destroy any boat that dared make its way onto the beaches.
These significant round things are mines. They're a type of mine called the Teller mine. They're on a post confronting incoming invading craft. Bear in mind that much of what you can now see, you can see only because the sea is low. They had expected invasion to come when the sea was high, and this lot would be largely invisible. If one of these goes off, it makes a hell of a loud bang, and God help anyone that's inside the vessel.
The next line of defense were hedgehogs, deadly structures with spikes of steel.
If, for example, a thin-hulled vessel comes off the sea, a troop-carrying thing, remember these may well be still underwater, but their hulls will be ripped apart by this.
Rommel was counting on the enemy invading at high tide. This would minimize the time their troops spent crossing the beach under enemy fire. When the tide came in, it would hide his underwater killing field. The Allies would need a way to ferry their troops over this deadly obstacle course. New Orleans, the home of jazz and shrimp gumbo. The last place you'd expect to find the solution. From 1941, the Allied command had been planning for an invasion. But they were thwarted by a chronic shortage of landing craft. And for D-Day, they were going to need thousands. But one small-time boat builder with big ideas had the confidence to take on the job. Andrew Jackson Higgins.
Oh, he could sit at the dining room table, and if we had guests, he could tell jokes for hours and hours and hours. You'd wonder, when are you going to stop, Pop?
This joker hardly had the typical credentials to win a big wartime shipping contract. His ramshackle boatyard wasn't even on water. It sat uncomfortably on the main street of New Orleans, and his business practices were not always on the right side of the law.
As the Depression was going on, there were few people who wanted to buy boats. Business was bad. He had to find a way to drum up some business. Well, the rum runners bringing rum in because of prohibition in the United States, you couldn't sell alcohol. The rum runners were bringing it in from Cuba, but the Coast Guard was catching them. So Higgins approached the rum runners and said, guys, what you need are faster boats, and I can design them for you. And he did. Now, once the rum runners had the new boats, Higgins then went to the Coast Guard and said, look, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but the rum runners are really making headway coming in through Louisiana. What you guys need are faster boats. So Higgins was doing a little creative marketing on the side, and it worked. It kept him in business throughout.
This maverick entrepreneur would one day be described by Eisenhower as the man who won the war for us. Renegade American entrepreneur Andrew Higgins was confident he could build the perfect assault craft. For a good reason. He already had one in his boat shed. His own private film archive, rediscovered just a few years ago, reveals that over 10 years before D-Day, by a huge quirk of fate, he had been the pioneer behind a boat that could skim over underwater obstacles. Not Rommel's exploding ones, but the floating logs and mangrove roots of the Mississippi. It had a shallow draft and a propeller and rudder cunningly tucked away in its hull. He called it the Eureka. He was desperate for the American Navy to take notice.
As the designer, builder of amphibious and landing craft equipment, it is proper that our company sponsor this training film. These pictures will show the sturdiness of the construction, so that the men that operate and the men that ride in them will have confidence that they have a strong hull under them that will surmount most obstacles. Bring the boats on in and damn the obstacles.
But